Welcome everyone, and this is just a quick how-to video on creating a generic business letter. So you should be able to use this video for any assignment in which you need to create a document in a generic business letter format. So I'm inside the instructional wiki right now, and so if you are not sure how to get to this particular page on generic business letters, you can always just go to the search menu up here and search for letter, business, and it'll be this first link right here. Okay, so you can read this page and kind of look at someone's annotations about the genre here. But I'm just going to open up this example so you can see what it looks like. So this is what a generic business letter looks like. And so it obviously looks different than, say, our memos. So this is what a memo looks like. Notice that there's no sincerely on a memo. There's no dear so-and-so on a memo. But in a letter format, it looks very different. So I'm going to take you through this formatting and what conventions there are and options. So anytime you create a generic business letter for this class, this is what it should look like. Okay, so I'm going to open up my Word document here, and this is basically an outline of the generic business letter format. Everything yellow I have highlighted is a convention, and a convention is basically just something that we do because it's what's expected. And so if this is a business letter, people expect to see these things. So the first thing is the sender's address block. So that would be your full name, your street address, and your city, state, and zip. So you can just write it that way. So I might say K. Emmert, and then my street address, 555 West Road Street. I'm obviously making this up. And then I would say Champaign, Illinois, 61820. So this is the US method. So if you are sending from a different country, you should definitely look up how they create, what the conventions are for their address blocks. But let's say I'm sending this on behalf of a business or in my role as a professional. You can, instead of having the address block, have letterhead. And so for all of these assignments, for most of them, we are mega consulting. And so what you can do is, going back to our wiki page, let's say I want to find the letterhead for mega consulting. So if you just type in letter up here, the first thing that's actually going to come up is the letterhead page. So if you click on that, this is what will pop up. And if you scroll down here, you can save this image. Do not try to copy and paste it, it won't work. But if you right click, save image as, and then insert it into your Word document, this is what it'll look like. Okay, so I've inserted that image. I'm just going to copy and paste it from one document to another. So instead of my address block, I can put the letterhead instead. Ta-da! Okay, so that's starting to look a little bit more professional. Then it is a convention to put in the current date. So, and there are many formats of this that are fine. So I might say June 13th, 2018 instead. Or I know another convention is to write it this way. That's okay as well. So any of those formats is fine. So I'm going to write it this way because I think it looks more professional, and unhighlight that. Okay, so now I'm ready to write in my recipient's address block. So this is the person you are sending this letter to. So you should write their full name, their street address, and their city, state, and zip. So in assignment 7083, we are sending a letter to Bruce Erickson, and so I'm just going to use his address as an example. So if I look up Bruce Erickson, the director for the program of professional writing, here is his professional address. So I'm just going to copy and paste that into my Word document. Oops. Make sure that you right click and then paste as text only. That way it won't change the formatting. So this is Bruce Erickson, So this here is the street address, so I know that needs to be on its own line. And then this is the city and state, so it needs to be on its own line. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, and then make sure that you have white space in between each of these blocks of information so that your proximity signals that this is different information. Now it's time for my salutation, and this is a conventional thing as well. So if you don't know who you're sending this to, you can say to whom it may concern with a colon, and to whom it may concern, every word starts with a capital letter. But I know who I'm sending this to. So you always want to be more specific in your salutation. You always want to select the most specific information. So I know I'm sending this to Bruce Erickson, but I also know from his profile that he has a PhD. So I want to call him Doctor instead of Mr. So I'm going to include that. It is the convention to call someone with a PhD doctor until they tell you not to. So I'm going to call him Dr. Erickson, and that will finish that up. Okay, next is your opening paragraph. So in professional business letters as well as professional emails, it is the convention that your first sentence be your purpose for writing. So you wouldn't want to start, especially a business letter, you wouldn't want to start with "my name is." It's very informal. It's more acceptable in an email to say that, but in a professional letter, don't begin with "my name is." They should know your name based off of other information in the document. So you want to simply say in one sentence what the purpose of this letter is. And the reason why that is a convention of business letters is because Bruce Erickson might be receiving hundreds of letters today. And so he needs to decide what file to put this in, if he's really the best person to address it, and when he wants to look at this. And so the easiest way for him to decide what to do with this letter is by looking at the first sentence, seeing what it is, and then he can address it in the way that he wants to. Now, memos may not have this, so you don't really have to do that in memos all the time because the subject line acts as the same thing as the first sentence in a letter. So the subject line of a memo tells me what the purpose of this document is. The purpose of this document, of this memo, is to talk about writing memos. So you don't really have to write the one sentence purpose for writing in a memo because the purpose for writing is in the subject line. And most business letters don't have that. Some of them may, but most of them don't. So that's why. So this first sentence here is basically like the subject line of a memo. So once you have that written, you can introduce context, whatever that appropriate context is, that he may not remember exactly what this document is for. And so this might appear as, work you've done, research you've done, just a couple of sentences introducing basic information about this document. And then it is the convention to close the intro with a thesis, and that is your overall idea or overall point. So if you do have a thesis or an overall argument or overall point, you would then break down that thesis into individual paragraphs. So basically what a thesis does is it introduces your the points from your body paragraphs. So if I'm going to be talking about what training programs would be appropriate for people working in Indonesia and what to avoid, I would say in my thesis, the most important things to include in a training program are X, Y, and Z, and we definitely want to avoid Y. So that would be your thesis, and then whatever you introduce in your thesis in the last sentence of your intro, you want to break that down into individual points. So I would prove X in its own body paragraph, and I would talk about Y in its own body paragraph, and then I would talk about Z in its own paragraph. Okay, so that's the opening paragraph. Then you should have at least one body paragraph in which you break down an individual argument. So whatever you introduce in your thesis, think of that as a promise to your reader. I promise to address this in further detail in my body. So make sure you fulfill those promises in your body paragraphs using the Peck order, so premise, evidence, conclusion for your body paragraph structure. And then you have a closing paragraph. And so there are a lot of conventions about a closing paragraph. These are usually fairly short. It is a convention to thank them for their time. We've been using closing paragraphs to address conflicts between points. So if you've got some ideas in your body paragraphs that may conflict with one another, then you want to talk about how to make sense of those conflicting points together. You may not always need this. And then finally, offer a call to action and a means to contact you. Now, the most obvious version of this convention is to say, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me at, and then your email address or phone number. And just make sure that whatever you list as your contact information, you are okay with them using it. So that's a pretty generic call to action if you have any questions. So if you really are just delivering information for them, that's fine. But what you want to try to do is try to adjust your call to action to something that will get something you want out of this relationship. So that will change, this call to action should change assignment to assignment or document to a document. But at the very least, it is the convention to say, if you have any questions or if you'd like to talk further, feel free to contact me, or please contact me at. Okay, so this is typically the last sentence of your letter. Then you should have your closing, sincerely, respectfully, and then this should be your full name. And then sometimes we put our titles here. So I might put it there. And sometimes it's a convention to have your employer. But if you're getting close for space, you can do that instead. That's okay. You don't always have to put the employer there. But so it is a convention to at least have that. You at least have that. But if you want to make sure that the person knows who you are and what your position is, absolutely put your title at least. And they should know what company you're writing for. So this might be useful information that you want them to know who's sending this. So in this case, it would be Mega Consulting, whatever the full title is, Mega Consulting Group. Okay. So that is the generic business letter format. If you have any questions, I hope that you'll feel comfortable bringing those to our virtual classroom or sending me an email. But this is what a generic business letter looks like. So you should definitely set up a template for yourself and be ready to use this anytime you need to create a letter. If you like this video, I hope you'll check out my others. Thank you.